Good morning. I'm Helen Best with the Treatment Implementation Collaborative. We wanted to have a conversation this morning with Dr. James Mazza from the University of Washington. He's the director of the School Psychology Program at the university and has extensive experience working with school districts with traumatic events. His specialty is mental health with youth and adolescent suicidal students or what happens with students when they've been exposed to violent behavior in the environment. So we wanted to, given the events, the tragic events in Connecticut and Newtown, Connecticut on Friday, we wanted to have a conversation with Jim because of all of the concern with students, administrators, and parents about how to talk with children. So we're here today just to have a conversation, to provide a resource to people so that they have something to look to in how do you engage and have a conversation about what happened. So Jim, good morning. Thanks for taking the time to speak with us today.
Thanks.
We know that you've got a lot of experience working with this type of a crisis situation. The first question, obviously, on everybody's mind is how do you have this conversation with kids? How do you have this conversation with students? What's the role of the school? What's the role of the teacher? What's the role of parents in having any kind of conversation depending on the age with the child that you're working with? So my first question to you would be, how do you explain this? How do you explain to a child why this person did what he did?
Thanks for starting off with the hard question first. So I think explaining it to a child about why the person did what they did, it becomes a hard question to answer because we really have the information of what the person was thinking. I think that, it's hard to explain the unexplainable at this point. And so what we want to make sure that we do is tell our students, our young folks, our kids too, that, that this, if it happened, we want to be very factual with them, and that this is a very rare, unusual event that happens. That would be the best approach to start with. We want to make sure that our teachers, parents, and schools are giving the child and their children the same type of information.
So I can see this conversation going differently, obviously, with a younger child versus a middle school child or young high school age child.
Yeah.
This rare event statistically, and it's in the news a lot. In the last week alone, there's been shootings in malls, there's shootings in schools, etc. How do we have the conversation saying, yes, you're seeing it a lot in the news, and you're safe?
Yeah, so great question. I think that what we want to do is inform our children, the young children especially, where they believe that the world is a pretty safe place, that there have been two rare events that have occurred very close to each other. And although you see coverage of these events day in, day out of late, there's still only just been two events, and that the schools, especially with this latest incident in Newtown, Connecticut, that schools are a very, very, very safe place to be. And make sure that we inspire our children that schools are a safe place to be, that it's okay to go to school, and that the likelihood of this happening in their own school is very, very, very small.
Okay. And what is too young to talk about the event?
I think from a general perspective, I think kids that are below the age of 3 is probably a little bit too young. I'm not sure they're going to understand the concept of death at all in that case. I think that they're going to not understand what it means for somebody else to take somebody else's life. 3 years old, 4-year-olds, I think are going to be able to understand it to their level. And so most 4-year-olds that I already experienced, like the death of a pet, the death of a parent, the death of some type of animal, some character that's on TV, something along those lines where they can have some small appreciation for someone or something that has died.
And in elementary age school children, obviously, you want to have that conversation with them.
Yeah. I'd want to be proactive about it because I think that school-age children are going to hear information from some of their older siblings or some of the older students. So a first grader is going to hear from a fourth or a fifth grader. And I think that our parents want to make sure that if this information is coming to their children, that it's coming from them because the parents know who their child is, knows what words that they can understand. Same thing goes to teachers. I think our teachers in first and second and third grade are really good at using first and second and third grade type words, and so they can put this event into words that our elementary students can understand, and also they can filter out some of the misinformation that's been going on there. So I think that I'd be proactive in wanting to do this, present the facts. The piece that happens if we decide not to talk to our children, especially in first and second grade, even kindergarten, is that from somebody else, their question then becomes, why wouldn't my parents have talked to me about this? If this was something important, I would have expected to hear that from my parents.
Okay. That's obviously, that will happen where you have younger children getting access to information from older siblings or older students at school.
Correct.
That makes sense. So what happens if now, which I can assume is happening, where kids are too afraid to go to school? What's the job of the school in that, and what's the job of the parent in that type of scenario?
That the school and the parents should work collaboratively and try to help that child feel safe at school. Now, most of the children have already been at their school since we're in the month of December, and their school hasn't changed at all. And I think that if the principals and the schools want to say, we're taking precautions and making sure that the doors are locked so that people have access to the school, that would help. If a child then begins to refuse to go to school, have the parent come with the child, let the parents sit in the class for a little bit, let the child get back into their routine that they had on Thursday before this happened in Connecticut. And they'll get back to that schedule pretty quickly.
One of the questions I would have, I think, if I was an administrator of a school or a teacher in a classroom is, make this front and center as a big part of the conversation today or this week or this month? Or do you let the children come to you and have a conversation at their own pace? Is this something that you put on the table first and foremost and aggressively go after, or just respond to what the questions are for the children coming in?
From my perspective and my professional opinion, I'd be proactive. I don't know how aggressive I would be, but I would definitely be proactive. I'd want to be using this morning or tomorrow morning some period of maybe that's 10, 15, 20 minutes if it's an elementary school. If it's a middle high school, maybe it's a longer period of time because those kids have questions and want to interaction, question and answer time with the material. Our elementary students, I think that we want to let them know that an incident happened, and unfortunately, very tragic. Unfortunately, some children died due to this event, and so that they know that we know the incident, and that we're doing everything that we can to keep them as safe as possible. And so I do that. If we take the other side or the other approach and wait for children to come to talk to us, there'll be some that do, but there'll be a lot of children that don't. And then they get that information out on the playground, or they're going to get it from somewhere else. The likelihood of that being factual and really accurate information, starts to decline pretty quickly.
As a school administrator, how do I help teachers prepare for that conversation? What can I do to support the teachers and the school counselors to be proactive in that conversation when they themselves might be having strong feelings of being or being fearful in the situation at hand?
Sure. I think that's a good question. I would, if I were a school administrator, I'd want to, kind of use my crisis plan. I'd want to call a meeting at 7 or 7:30 in the morning before any of the students get there. I'd want to, produce a sheet that the teachers can read to their students. It's not on them to come up with all the details at that moment, so it's much easier for our teachers to read. I'd also want to have a chance, in that meeting would be an opportunity for the teachers to grieve or to ask questions that they themselves have. And so I think that'll be helpful, that they can process some of this information. They can also kind of strategize what they would say to their children. That school administrator should also then say, hey, look, the designated time to when we're going to be talking to our students is going to be from 8:15 to 8:30. And I'll come on to the PA system. At 8:15, I'm going to say, hey, teachers, please read the fact sheet that we provided to you this morning. So each class is getting the information at the same time, allowing them to be proactive in discussing what occurred, and the teacher being receptive to whatever the students are asking regarding their questions.
It's an appropriate forum for teachers to share their own personal feelings with students, or do you think it's it's an actual conversation. You know, is it okay for teachers to share their vulnerabilities and feelings of shock and worry, or should they just keep to the facts?
I think keeping to the facts is really the most important piece. I don't think that you want to be robotic, though, either. So I think that the teachers can say, yes, this was really hard for them to understand. Yes, this was tragic. So I think you want that. Now, a teacher that controllably is likely actually to induce a lot more feeling into that class of those students than maybe the situation even warrants. And so I think that we want to be careful about their individual interpretation and individual feelings being misinterpreted by some of the students.
Okay. And how, as administrator, how do I deal with parents who are upset that I'm having this conversation with students at school, or that we want to bring this front and center, where some parents may want to not have this conversation at all?
Right.
It's the holiday season. They don't want to taint it. They want to keep it quiet and just move forward.
I think that you want to be able to listen to the parent. You want to be able to validate that their concern is that their child not hear this information at all, and be able to listen to that. At the same time, it's the school administrator's job to make sure that the students feel safe and that the school is deemed to be safe. And so you don't know that information without providing it out there proactively. And so a student's not going to come up to you who heard about this information to say, I think my school's unsafe. And so I would say that we want to be making sure that we're proactive in helping our kids feel safe, know that they're safe. And that may include at some point in time in the next week or early January when they come back from the break to go through the safety planning again, go through the emergency crisis drills that schools tend to do on a regular basis.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the teacher can be upset, and that's okay. They get upset about the parents can be upset, and they can be upset at. Yet I think that the principal, the school administrators need to ensure that they're making sure that the environment at that school is conducive for all students. Mm-hmm. And that ruffle a few parents' feathers.
Yeah. What should I be doing for teachers and staff who are understandably really shaken by this? It's not just the students who are going to be shaken. Right. I've got teachers and staff who are shaken by this as well. As an administrator, what should I be doing? What's my role in supporting them to have their own conversations about this?
Yep. So I think having that early morning meeting to let teachers be able to vent their feelings or frustrations or anger or just hurt, I think is really helpful. I think teachers that have a really strong emotional reaction to this, and the concern there being that their strong emotional reaction is going to come out to their students who might be in first or second or third grade, and that might be misinterpreted, I would try to pair them with maybe the school counselor or school psychologist that works in the mental health area that would be able to provide kind of a bit of a team approach and be able to provide some students with information that wouldn't necessarily have such a strong emotional reaction.
And, obvious, it's mental health services, it's access to support. It's normal, it's normalizing that everybody is shaken by this, yep. Especially by the nature of the age of the victims involved and the holiday season. I mean, that's a big factor in this. What happens with, you address that with kids, where a lot of kids want to go forth and celebrate, and yet there's this incident that's such a part of it where it's almost as though we feel like we shouldn't be celebrating. How do we work with the kids that, want them to be there, at the same time recognize what happened last Friday?
Right. So that's a delicate balance. I think our elementary kids are not going to have the same deep emotional reaction that some of our adolescents and even some of our middle schoolers will have, and so I'm worried about them at this point having those deep inbound type feelings. Our middle school and our adolescents, I think you're right to be at the point of celebrating the holidays here when this just happened and this is just a crisis. I think flipping the coin, you know what, we need to be together. Those teachers in Newtown were heroes. They saved a lot of children. That situation could have been worse. And I think that we have to start looking at our our schools as kind of a community that we help other when they have as many reasons, when they're down, or people are feeling left out. We have to start saying as peers and as teachers, hey, what's going on? We have to start asking those questions maybe more proactively instead of letting people kind of fall off the radar screen or kind of move out to the outskirts of the peer groups. And so I think that you can double down it and say, hey, you matter here for us. If I haven't talked to you in a couple of months, you matter. And, you know, I want to make sure that I'm listening to you, that you're involved this holiday season, and everybody has a right to celebrate.
Okay. And I guess that would be the same answer to the question of, you have a student who really doesn't want to talk about this,
yeah,
who's visibly withdrawn in any kind of group conversation or saying, leave me alone, I don't want to talk about this.
Yeah.
Where do you go with that student?
I would let that student, so that's likely to be a defense mechanism. I would let that defense mechanism stand. I mean, I don't think you want to plow through that one and say, okay, I understand that you don't want to talk about it now, and I want you to know my door is always open, and I'm willing to talk about any subject at any time. You know, I will stop what I'm doing. You have my ear. And I think that message for our adolescents is really, really important, because I think that they believe don't care to have the time or don't care about their issues. And I think we want to kind of change that message. And so I would let that defense mechanism stand. And then if I saw that person in the hall, you know, a day later or 2 days later, I would say, hey, how are things going? And that could be as much as great, could be a thumbs up, could be a thumbs down, something that just says, I haven't forgotten you, and I'm just letting you know you're on my radar.
Okay. And probably the same age range. You know, it's not unusual now for fifth graders to have access to technology through cell phones. They have their own cell phones, iPads, etc. They have access to information, whether or not. If we might be censoring how much news they're watching or how much access to the details and photographs of the event that happened, but they're still going to get it on their own.
Yep.
Do we have the assumption that they're well informed, or do we try to control what they're seeing?
I think we can make the assumption that they're informed. Well-informed to me suggests that they have the right information or accurate information, and I'm sure that's going to be the case. As a matter of fact, I would be more alarmed because I think if they're found on Twitter or Facebook, there's probably a lot of misinformation that's there, and there's no way to kind of filter out what is accurate or what is factual and what is not. So I think what you'd want to say is, hey, before you react to anything that's on Facebook or Twitter or that you're seeing on the internet, come with us, because our job is also to provide factual information back to you, the students, people that are collecting this information. So I would be kind of a filter for checking to see what information is really factual at that point. The other thing, let me add one more. The other thing that I would be concerned about on the technology side and what you see on the internet is the sensationalism, and that's something that we want to try to reduce as much as possible. So we talk to the kids about events like this. We want to make sure that we're being very factual without any sensationalistic detail. All we want to do is present the facts of what happened, and we don't answer the question of why this occurred, because we don't have that answer. So I would stick to the facts. Okay.
I guess then the last question really is, what's the school's role in supporting a child who really is having a hard time with this? Maybe, you know, really anxious, maybe very stressed out, sleep impact, etc., where this is just someone who's been deeply affected by this, and obviously more than your mainstream kid who have the conversation. What's the school's role in supporting that individual student in getting through this this event, and how do they bridge the gap there?
So I think the school's role is twofold on that one. I think that, you know, our teachers are just fantastic, and they work under very trying situations, have huge number of students in their classrooms. And so if a teacher sees someone that's very distraught about this, it's very hard for them to be the interventionist and the teacher at the same time, because there's the needs of a lot of other students there besides this one individual. However, we would really like that teacher to contact someone such as myself, like a school psychologist or a school counselor, to say, hey, you know, this person's really struggling. And it's our job then, the school psychologist or school counselor, to come and talk to this individual and see if we can't get them to talk to us a bit and provide some type of an assessment. Oftentimes, kids struggling with these issues often have other issues that are going on in their lives, and so without doing some assessment, we don't know what those are. And so I think that we could be opening up a much broader picture of mental needs that this individual might have. And I think it's up to us, the school counselors, school psychologists, to find out what those needs are. If they can be within the place at school, that is fine. If not, the school has an obligation to say, hey, you know what, this is beyond our expertise, beyond our abilities of the school personnel. We think we should have a conversation with the parent to say, your child could really benefit from behavior therapy or other services that are outside of the school.
Okay. Well, I think this has been incredibly helpful in terms of understanding how to move forward. Obviously, every school in the country today is struggling with what do we do and how do we do it. Many of them already have crisis plans in place, intervention plans in place,
right.
And it was such a devastating experience for everybody. It's one of those events that everybody's going to know what they were doing when they found out about what happened. So we appreciate your time today, just giving us your thoughts, sharing your expertise with what to do moving forward and how to approach us. As you know, we'll be offering something in the next few months as a crisis intervention planning training that's web-based. And so if anybody's interested, they can get more information. But we appreciate your time today just helping get the word out about how to move forward with this in an effective way for students and youth. Would you recommend do you have any resources that you would recommend or websites or anything that we could point people to support them?
Yeah, the one that I would recommend right now is the NASP online resource. I can provide you with that link. They do a really nice job of for teachers, parents, and school personnel about how to talk about these situations and what kind of language to use for elementary, middle school, and high school students. And so, and then online website is for the National Association of School Psychologists. They receive training in those areas, and so I think that's a very useful website for our teachers, our parents, and our school administrators to read through, especially during this time.
Okay, I can provide a link to that website as well with the resource. So again, Dr. Mazza, thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate your this, and hopefully the country will be able to move ahead and honor what happened to the people in Newtown, Connecticut on Friday.
I'm glad.
Okay, thanks.
Yep, take care.